Thank you.
Perfect.
Awesome. Happy to be here with Sam. Hi, Sam.
Hey, Mike, how you doing? Thanks so
My,
much for
my
having me on.
pleasure. You've got a really cool product. You've been working for years on building this amazing thing. Walk us through what is Loper and what's the story behind it?
Yeah, so Loper is a free mobile app today, really supporting high school students with that transition to four-year college. But our vision is how can we support students every step of the way from high school all the way up until early career, really? And we look at it's not just there's a lack of transparency with how can I apply, how can I get into a college that matches my own needs, but how can I think about the entirety of the post-secondary market, but also that end outcome where you're a 16, 17, 18-year-old starting to think about what's next. We don't pursue education for the sake of education. I think there's some folks at liberal arts colleges that would push back on me right now, and I'm very empathetic to that stance. So I think if we look at, hey, what just the market as a whole, when I talk with high school students, when I talk to parents of high school students, people are thinking at the end of the day about, job and what education means for them. So I think if it comes back to where we are and sitting with Loper in that origin story, there's just a complete lack of transparency into the market, into what your educational experience is going to be, what you're going to pay for that education. And I remember when my co-founder Eric and I, we actually are good reflections of the value of college. We met our first week at freshman year at Georgetown. Here we are starting a company, 5, 6 years later together. But we've never seen a good or a service where you spend as much money as you do on higher education. You have so little transparency. And I always love to use Rich Barton as a founder who really has motivated me personally. Founded Expedia, Zillow, Glassdoor, all built around this notion of power to the people. How can we take these goods and services, if you want to buy a house, if you want to travel, that are really opaque markets for the consumer, bring more transparency in that decision-making process, you're going to see better results. That's our ultimate belief, is if we can help students make better decisions when evaluating today their four-year college, they're going to be happier on campus. They're going to ultimately see stronger outcomes through that education. That's going to lead to upward social mobility. And that's that big vision for us. Like, inequality is the defining issue of our time, and it
Yeah,
starts for us with
that
education.
is incredibly well said. Yeah, and there is this like weird black box thing with college admissions sometimes, right? Where students, we see it all the time, where students apply to multiple places and they don't know why they're getting into some places and not getting into others, and there's not necessarily a feedback mechanism there. How do you sort of work to solve that?
Yeah, on the and just to make sure I'm taking this direction correctly, you're talking about just really that admissions process specifically within an individual school. Yeah, I think, you know, it's a tough question, and this is where we try and bring in college stakeholders. So we're really excited to have, we do view as a curated partner network of just over a dozen colleges. So on our app, students can learn about, match with, and just in terms of a little bit more on how Loper apps, or excuse me, how Loper works as an app. Students are building a profile. We're capturing more data on who they are and what they care about than anyone else in the space. Our user experience, which happy to dive into later, really is our secret sauce. That's why students love our app. 4.8 stars in the App
For
Store
sure,
is a
yeah,
little bit of a plug,
1,000
but they're
reviews
learning
too,
about
which
any
is amazing.
college. Yes, which I know I appreciate and really pumped about hitting that milestone internally. But they can learn about any college. We have this curated partner network, and that's where we're trying to work with. And these schools range from Purdue School of Business to more regionalized nonprofits like Siena College in New York. And it's how can we work with these admissions teams to provide a lot more information on the student experience, give students, even with pieces like for Siena fast track admissions, where it's almost a likely letter of admissions, just give students a sense that, hey, okay, I am a good fit. I fall into the school. It aligns with my interests. I am qualified. And at that point, if we can help students build a list of schools where they can actually have a sense of their qualifications and if it aligns with their interests, I don't think we're going to get to the point for your highly selective schools of saying you have a 16.8% chance of getting into Harvard. I actually don't know how big of a problem that is. People would love to have it, but I think it's more great. Harvard's a really competitive school. Here are 8 to 10 of those schools that are really competitive. but actually align with your interests. And here's how you might maximize that student experience on campus. And then, by the way, here's 4 to 6 other great options. And then for students who aren't necessarily looking at that highly, highly competitive school, it's how can we build a list of 10 to 12 schools that really match up with your interest and who you are, and show you content that is relevant to yourself, not just the generalized emails, physical mailers, and marketing messages they're, for better or worse, inundated with today.
So cool. And how do you make that match work, right? Like you've got millions and millions of data points, I'm assuming, right? Because you've got such a huge base of consumers that are using your app. And then you've got massive sort of data on the other side from all these sort of institutions. How do you like internally work that matchmaking process so that the user experience is just clean and easy and all those things?
Yeah, and this is where I think if our CTO, whose name is also Sam, is on the call, he'd be really excited to
So
start geeking out and going down like a 5 to 10 minute route. And it does feel like sometimes you have to use capital A, capital I next to each other, and that certainly is we're really excited about how AI can continue to improve our matching process. But to keep this answer a bit more concise for the sake of this call, it is really thinking about all of those data points allow us to build more granular segments of users. And if you think about um, how college matching works, or even college marketing works, it's great. Light filtering, and maybe you can almost think about those different, like a tree, the different user journeys of, hey, okay, if you're interested in sports and you want a school in the Midwest, these 200 schools fall in that bucket with this, what I'll call very loose segment. For us, it's all of these data points. You can almost think about building really, really individualized segments of users. We don't truly get down to that point of thinking one of one for each individual student, but I do think it's a nice thing about that. Wow, every single student in this application process is unique. How can we think about them as uniquely as possible, but then also group them when we get to those really granular segments into similar buckets? And you can almost think about an arc, and this is starting to get into what technically happens on the back end. But you have almost like every person has their own individual shapes, and shapes are related to each other based off their similar properties, characteristics, and interests. And colleges have similar shapes too when you start to evaluate the data points on their side. And so it's not just capturing so much information about our users, but it's also how can we get a deeper understanding of these schools? And that's where having this curated partner network really helps, because we can actually ingest more content directly from that school to help get a better sense of what is the shape of that school, what are their different attributes, and then how much for each individual user does that overlap with with the shape of a specific college. So starting to kind of dance on the technical side, but it's a really, really interesting way, I think, to start solving this problem. And what technologies allow us to do that probably 5 years ago we couldn't have done in the space is start to get towards that more individualized sense of both our users, but also schools and eventually boot camps and careers and other pathways all can have those different shapes. So it's an evolving process, but something that I think in the next 3 to 6 months we're excited to really improve. I think as we start to cross volumes of user data that starts to unlock this
that
process
is
and make
so
it all
cool
easier.
and fascinating. And I love what you said about the shapes, because it seems to me that there's a really sort of unique market opportunity that could be out there for different sort of partner institutions, in that positioning institutions is a huge challenge in a lot of places, because they're run, I think, by whether it's a PR firm that they're working with or sort of internal staff or whatever. Everybody's got this idea of sort of what makes them unique. In my experience, those are not necessarily sort of unique in the marketplaces. They're attributes that sort of people are striving to, hey, this is really sort of unique. But there's a lot of places that are really sort of doing this. It seems to me that your technology opens up this door to really find more sort of niche and position these places in a really crowded and noisy market space.
Yeah, and what's so counterintuitive about, I'll say, like the college admissions process, but and really specifically on the enrollment marketing side, is we end up thinking about the process in terms of volume. How many students can you reach? And you need to reach hundreds of thousands of students in your funnel, whether it's name buys, however you're sourcing student names, whether you're working with Loper, whether you're buying names from the College Board. We talk about massive volume. And then we talk with our individual partners. It's like 8 students move the needle. We're not even in some cases talking double digits. Like truly 7 or 8 students are what they're talking about moving the needle. And we live in this volume world, but to influence 7 or 8 students, I think there's a different approach, and it's hard to talk. Like personalization can just be a very empty word in some situations, but can we facilitate and broker what feel like much more individual connections? And I think on your point, like experiential learning is something that so many schools have offerings around, but those experiential learning offerings are all incredibly unique at each individual campus. And it's starting, and I think that's a great example area that we can think about. Okay, I have experiential learning. Is experiential learning on my campus unique just for the sake of it? No, but that an individual experiential learning offering is. And how can we think about that offering, getting that offering in front of the student who is interested in that unique circumstance? And I think right now we spoke with Augsburg in Minnesota, just in the Twin Cities, just earlier this week, and they have this amazing canoe experience, like semester where students are on a canoe taking classes down the Mississippi River, and I'm probably going to end up butchering their experiential learning offering, so apologies in advance. But it's like, wow, I've never heard of something like that. And for a student who wants that like quasi outdoor fun experience, that's it for them. And you can go down a list of schools and they all have something similar to that, that we want to just get in front of the right. Experiential learning, in my opinion, is just like a great example for how colleges get to engage on the platform, where experiential learning as a concept, not unique. Most schools have something that fits in that lens of experiential learning. But I've been amazed at how unique each of those different experiential learning offerings are across schools, and even how unique they are within the same campus. I think the granular can so often helps a student imagine themselves fitting in on campus. It's how can you get that very specific offering in front of the right student who's interested. I spoke with Augsburg in the Twin Cities earlier this week, and they have such a cool program around and I'll probably butcher this, so I hope they won't get too mad at me, but students who you're actually spending a semester and you're taking classes along the Mississippi River. It involves a canoe trip. You're building a canoe, and it's like, wow, how can you get that student who loves the outdoors, who wants something a little bit different, maybe learns best outside of a traditional classroom setting? How can they see that opportunity and relative to a different experiential learning opportunity on a different campus? And because we're capturing so much information about our students, we can push out the right content. And what that literally looks like on the app is, as students engage, and often that's swiping right and left on what they're most interested in, a bit of Tinderization, but there's all sorts of different user interfaces on the platform where, as we capture more information on students, they fall into segments. We can push that content to them through what we call highlights. We also have sponsored prompts, so students can actually swipe right and left specifically on that unique experiential offering if we work with a partner school to bring it onto the app. And then I think the final piece that we actually got to work with Purdue's Business School on is getting on campus ourselves, speaking with students, recording that specific content, and hosting that on the app. And I think it's almost like this mid-funnel experience where college websites are great in some areas, but they can often fall short. And a student who maybe doesn't know how to navigate that and get to the information that they want, or that wall of text isn't exactly how they want to engage with content, we can just drop that video content or these pictures or short form blurbs, quotes from students into the app, and make sure that it shows up for the right student audience when they engage with that college profile. And student A may not be seeing exactly what student B is seeing when they're engaging with Purdue, and that's great. Yeah, I think in terms of process, it all starts with talking to users, and I appreciate the nice words, but I know we internally look at each other every day and it's like, this isn't exactly where we want it to be. It's not quite there. And that probably for as long as Loper exists, we'll have those types of feelings and those types of conversations because you can always pursue better. You just always can. There's always something to improve. And I think it's that ethos of, okay, there's always something to improve. Let's go talk to our students, let's figure out what they actually want when going through the process. That is, in many ways, our competitive edge. We've been so lucky to work with a great student advisory board, almost 20 different high schoolers. So far, it's been about 2 months. We're going to be working with them through the end of the year before probably bringing in a new class of student advisors. Completely eye-opening. And I wish we had set this up a year ago, 2 years ago, even, instead of just more of that ad hoc speaking to users on the platform. So that from a process perspective is so important to us. In terms of what that actually looks like on the app right now, we are really quickly dropping students into an experience where they can right now swipe right, left, up, down on first high level preferences, where I think most college search tools stop around what part of the country do you want to study in, large school, small school, if you have financial need, etc. Trying to put this in language that students understand. And then one change we're actually making is introducing a home screen. As the app has expanded, we've realized it's not just, we can't just drop students into further swiping on more granular prompts where, hey, students love it. There's hundreds, close to 1,000 different what we call prompts that students can interact with that then naturally drive them towards matches, drive them to save a school. And what starts with this deep introspection leads to, wow, I've learned about a campus and now I'm learning about how this campus matters to me. That was the core aspect of the Loper experience that we've gotten great feedback from. But as we started to introduce new avenues for students to explore, or even bring in more content that I would say is not school specific exploration, but major exploration, career exploration, we needed a home screen that's going to be live on the app in the next couple of weeks to really center our users, to make them, for lack of a better word, feel at home when they open the app. And this for us is what's going to allow us to catapult into not just being this discovery and exploration tool for students, but almost a college concierge. And I think about not just college concierge, but college and early concierge, where we can take students to return that pain point we talked earlier on the call. High school, the career in many ways is broken. How can we be that support system for a student every step of the way from their initial search up until application and enrollment? And if we fulfill the ultimate vision of Loper, support them all the way through that educational experience up until that endpoint, the goal, their first job coming out of college, or in the future, a different educational pathway. Yeah, and I think just on that point to go a little bit deeper with where we see the vision for Loper, education as an industry, and I'll say higher education, and maybe right now we're thinking about this just in that four-year college lens. Education is great at educating students. That is their first core piece. And then I think if we go a layer deeper to the different support services offered to students on campus, there are great people there. There are great individuals who can offer student support, but navigating that process, I don't think is where, I don't think the reach and breadth of student services is where colleges excel, where higher education excels right now. They're great at educating, they're great at teaching students, they're great individuals who can be that high touch support system. I almost, if we think about it within the lens of private business, customer success function is there. But what about when you navigate a product or experience? All of those different pieces where it's like, I don't actually want to talk to a human, I just want my answer solved. That's where I think there's a huge fall down. And I don't mean to ring alarm bells, or I think privatization of education, it carries such a loaded phrase and can take people down what can be a really ugly and scary path. but I really just mean the privatization in that sense of like navigating the campus. And it's not, and that's where that concierge idea comes in. You're spending tens of thousands, in some cases, hundreds of thousands of dollars on this good and experience. I don't think it's a big issue to say, can students potentially work with an outside vendor, or even is there a premium offering that down the line results in like $9.99 a month to navigate this luxury good? I don't think that's a terrible paradigm for us to have in our head, and to really start thinking about student support services as customer success that they would be in a private company. And if you have that lens, what does that mean for what can fill the gap of a broader support function for a product or a service? And that's where we start to see the opportunity for us to step in as we grow beyond just exploration discovery. Because we do a good job getting students there. Now we want to take them through that educational pathway. Yeah, I think I'll lead with there are, my guess is as good as anyone else's here. It's I wish I had the answer. It's it's a really, really interesting question, and people much smarter, much more experienced than myself have opined here as well. So I'd certainly caveat everything that I'm saying with I am one voice in a rightfully crowded room here talking about this issue because of how important it is. In terms of the admissions landscape, to start there with where I see it changing, I think that we first need to separate out, so many people have your highly selective universities from everyone else, from the 95% of schools that are accepting more than a quarter of their applicants. And I think you can slightly lower that percentage and start to talk about more than half of the applicants, and so on down the line. Right now, we treat college as a luxury good, when college is a luxury good. It's treated like a luxury good with a price, with a process, but education is a necessity for a thriving workforce and a thriving democracy. So my hypothesis here is that we start to we start to see those highly selective universities keep this more rigorous, detailed process. I'll say quest for an individualistic process, because when you're dealing with hundreds of thousands of applicants, I don't know how you do that internally. I think you'd have to ask those universities. But for everyone else, we start to say, okay, like we are adding all of these layers of friction in our process that don't necessarily need to be there. It's not a commoditized good, but it's something that does need a clearer connection to ROI in the workforce. I think continue to see consolidation. I think you're going to continue to see specialization from schools. I think what colleges will do better, and you've seen this push toward direct admissions. We have something that's slightly different. I won't dive too far into kind of our qualms, or where we don't see direct admissions quite solving the problem. We introduced something called fast track admissions on the platform, but I think you're going to give students a better idea earlier on of, hey, you are going to be able to come to our campus. But I think admissions now start to turn into, hey, how can we pitch students and show students that they will actually be successful here? And I think narrowing in and saying, instead of 60 majors on campus, we have a dozen majors, we have 20 majors, or there are, within this specific path, if you want to be a nursing student on this campus, you will see outcomes. And I think being able to reframe academic offerings, that admissions process, better in terms of outcomes for the student will be really, really helpful. So I think you're going to see that message come across earlier in the process to more and more students, which I think is great for them. And then to kind of get to the flip side of where it turns into career and where we fit in, this is a matching problem right now. We have a changing economy and we have new jobs. There's a talent gap in so many places. A great example being the semiconductor industry. Who's going to fill in that educational gap that is part of the talent gap? Like we have a shortage of 50,000 high purity welders, I think is the number for Intel's new facility in Columbus, Ohio. 50,000 high purity welders over the next, call it 5 to 10 years. Who is going to educate those high purity welders? Is it going to be the companies themselves, or are you going to continue to see existing institutions, which I think will happen at least to a degree, shift their offerings to meet this labor market demand? Us as Loper, we just want to sit in the middle. As colleges shift their offerings, I think they narrow in on their offering. We're going to sit in the middle and do a better job of identifying students who are a potential good fit or who explicitly express interest in that career pathway and that academic offering, and then make the connection. And to bring this full circle, I think you're going to have this still very heavy friction, luxury good, traditional admissions process for these highly selective universities. But for the remainder, the vast majority, I think it becomes less about creating this heavy friction process, but more making that almost higher touch, higher quality match, thinking less about volume and just great. What is supply and demand? And can we find a granular segment of students who meet demand for our offerings and get them interested earlier than ever? And it's not about your acceptance rate and your yield rate and all those pieces. I'm sure your yield rate would improve in that scenario, but it's about filling seats. And those seats should lead to a job and a strong outcome after college. So a really long answer there. I hope everyone was able to track as I go full circle. But our job is just to sit in the middle and broker connections and serve our students. Yeah, no, one, you always find me, the company, on LinkedIn. You find me on LinkedIn, email sam@getloper.com, but head over to our website. I think it'll give a pretty quick sense for what we're doing. But yeah, we'd love for you to reach out. If you're on the higher ed side, we do have a college specific landing page. So scroll on down to the bottom of our website. You'll see a link that goes over to a for colleges page that will give you a little bit of a sense of how we work with that curated partner network. You can book a call on there. You can request, we can send over some more information, give you a little preview of your school's engagement, organic engagement today, which I think will be helpful before setting up any demo to talk about how can we actually boost that offering for your school. But LinkedIn, email, and then the last piece is just download the app. Go ahead, download the app. You don't have to be a student. You can select that you're a counselor. You can select that you're an educator when you go through that profile flow. It will not change your experience, but put yourself in the lens of a high school student. And if you can, sit down with a high school student next to you and go through the app and start to imagine, especially if you're on the higher ed side, how could I engage with students who are going through this process and having this Loper specific student experience? So we're always open to new ideas, but LinkedIn, email, great places to read. Go to the website and please download the app. Of course, Mike, it was great chatting, and thanks so much for having me on. Yes. No, I love it. Yeah, I'm seeing 96% uploading on my side. Do I need to leave this open for a little bit? What should I do? Sweet. That sound, wait, so sorry, I got distracted with the Slack page right there. So leave it open. You're going to hit refresh and I should leave this open for about 5 minutes. Sweet. And then was this kind of along the lines of what you wanted to accomplish? I sometimes feel like on these podcasts, I can say a lot and nothing at all. So would be curious if this is what you're looking for. Okay. Awesome. That that'd be great. And the other thing is what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to, I'll send you her email and you'll be able to find her on LinkedIn. But if you, because I am sometimes bad here, we just hired a head of growth marketing who's awesome. She's based here in Chicago. She, if you want to set anything that we can do to help like promote this, even if it's as simple as resharing, but like she'll probably offer better thoughts on like clips, or potentially if you send over clips, you might have an idea of like, oh, here's how we can extend this out to our network. So I'll just send you her email and LinkedIn now. But I'd say like if you want to follow up with both of us in a chat or both of us on email, that'll make sure she's probably going to be the one on our side who has better thoughts and is actually actioning upon these things. Awesome. Hey, we'll make it work. Amazing. Well, Mike, thanks so much for having me on, and pumped to get this live, and excited to. I'm excited you like the framing on concierge because we're working on it. It's that is it's an evolving process, and that shift I talked about earlier of like, are we trying to go serve this consumer side? We're That's the high level framing we're going with. We can't say co-pilot because it's so heavily layered with AI. It's like co-pilot is what we want to say, but once we say co-pilot, like it's, oh, you just are a chat bot that is helping through a process. Like, not quite. So we're figuring it out. Awesome. Well, we'll figure out what the heck 19. That's why we got this advisory board. We can chat with them and see what they like. Start there. Awesome. We'll do. Thanks, Mike.